Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for being with us and for staying with us. I hope so far you're really learning a lot. It's a great and insightful leadership forum, and thank you leaders for staying this far. And I hope all the sessions that have happened have been insightful and beneficial to you. And yet this is yet another session where we'll be discussing about building a digital savvy agriculture workforce. Yeah, and we've heard from previous speakers and panelists that definitely agriculture is becoming increasingly digitalized. We are seeing innovations around data around mobile technologies, AI, as well as digital platforms. But then one question that is coming up, how are we actually preparing the Africa workforce to thrive in this new digital agri-tech era? And that's what we're discussing here today, from all the way from mobile-based training tools for farmers to, vocational centers offering digital agronomy skills. Definitely this conversation is about how do we connect these dots? How do we ensure that digital agriculture is being embedded in formal education as well as training systems? How do we ensure inclusivity of these learnings or access to these technologies through education and through formal training to ensure that we are not leaving rural youth as well as women behind in this transformation happening within the agricultural system? So to unpack these discussions, we have a very great panel joining us here today. They are a powerhouse panel of experts, educators, as well as practitioners who are actually shaping the future of digital capacity building or even policy across the agri-food ecosystem. And I will start off introducing each one of them. And the first one is Mr. Magero, who is a youth manager at Kabi. And of course, he has done quite a lot of work with experience across Africa, UK, Asia, and Middle East, and is all about fostering youth leadership as well as workforce development. So over to you, Mr. Magero. Just introduce yourself and let us know what role you're playing in actually building a digital savvy workforce. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gladys. Hi, everyone. I'm very delighted to be here for the great work you're doing, and hi, leaders. Congratulations as well. Well, as Gladys you mentioned, my name is Deogratias Magero. I work at Kabi, which is Center for Agriculture and Biosciences International, as a youth engagement manager. This is basically driving the strategy, program design, as well as, of course, the whole element of program management and partnerships to enable our young people build successful income generating, I would say, opportunities as well as careers, both waged and self-employment in agriculture. And driving this, of course, is technology at the center of it all, appreciating the advancing world of technology today. So Kabi has different tools and different digital opportunities that we'll talk about, but it's basically driving youth engagement across the sector broadly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're really excited to have you on this panel. Second, we are going to be hearing from Karen Bett, who is a Senior Policy Manager, Global Partnership for Sustainable Development and Data, the Africa Office. And we're really excited to have you on this panel, and just let us know a bit about yourself, your institution, and how it's actually contributing to this topic around building a digital workforce. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Gladys. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. As mentioned, I work with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. It's an initiative of the UN Foundation, and it's an institution that was established to champion data for measuring and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, championing means many things. It's about strengthening systems. It's around brokering institutions to work to amplifying where it's so working in the agriculture sector, both at the country level, but also at the global policy level would be, providing insights both from the data side, from the inclusive often populations that are often left behind in terms when it comes to digitization, as well as when it comes to data. Thanks, Gladys.
Thank you so much, Karen. And our third panelist is Dr. Kibrom Abe, who is a senior research fellow at IFPRI, and he's a development and agriculture economist with a lot of research interest in rural development, agriculture transformation, as well as urbanization and behavioral economics. Thank you so much, Dr. Abe, for being with us today. Introduce yourself and let us know how you're actually promoting this topic that you're discussing.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Gladys. This is a timely topic. So my name is Kibrom Abe. I am an economist, and I'm working as senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute. When it comes to digital innovation and agriculture, we work quite a lot on testing different mechanisms and interventions to support diffusion of digital innovations to support agricultural transformation. And when we think of that, what we do is we test different training methods, educational interventions to support and particularly address some of the supply and demand side constraints that different stakeholders and users face. And we're doing that in different settings in Africa. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are very excited for you to join us today. And definitely, last but not least, our panel expert, Ronald Misigo, who is a digital agriculture and food system expert at CGIAR. Definitely, you've done quite a lot of work around ICT innovation as well as the agriculture sector. Please feel free to introduce yourself and let us know what you're doing around building a digital.
Thank you, Gladys. I'm Ronald Misigo. I work with Agri Experience, which is a consulting firm in Kenya, based in Kenya, but we work around 20 sub-Saharan African countries. At Agri Experience, we have built quite a large pool of digital agriculture tools, starting from platform that farmers use to select varieties in the field in what they can plant. We have built SMS tools that farmers use in terms of communicating with governments. And also we have looked into women and youth in terms of which platform fits them in terms of usability and access in terms of mobile phone-based platforms. And I'm happy to contribute to this discussion in terms of youth and women, especially in accessing digital tools which are simple to use, are very friendly, and can pass reliable information every season. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you're excited as I am just to hear from our panelists to contribute to this discussion of how we are preparing the Africa workforce to thrive in the new digital agri-tech era. And to kick us off, I'll pose this question to Karen. And looking at your work, around developmental data, what do you think are the most urgent digital skills gap in agriculture today, and who is at the risk of being left behind? So what are the most important skills, and what are the risks, or who has a high likelihood of being left behind with this transformation we're seeing within agri-tech?
Thank you, Gladys. I'll sort of try to answer that question in two blocks, the most urgent digital skills, and then of course, those who are at risk of being left behind. I think on the way I see it, what are the most urgent digital skills gap? And sort of putting it in the perspective of the continent we live in, I sort of group them into three categories. Of course, the technology use, data literacy, and as well as access, which is also a skill that is necessary. And when I think about digital literacy, when we say that we want our farmers to be, digital savvy or have the digital literacy skills, we're thinking of, can they use a smartphone? If they can't use a smartphone, Do they have access to a mobile phone, even if it's not a smartphone, but it's a phone that can allow them to communicate, and so that the mobile technology becomes a medium of passing information and building those digital skills. But also there's a skill that we need, farmers, but as well as decision makers to us. So imagine a farmer getting access to weather information, knowledge on the best seeds, access to fertilizer, access to markets. But what decisions do they make based on that information? So it's a skill that is more than just operating a smartphone, but it's really to make meaning and to make the smartest decisions based on all the information that comes to them. I think also what's needed is, the best data for the best decision. So, do we have access to the most accurate weather information? And, is that available to all at no cost or at very minimal cost? We all know that access is a challenge. Accessing the perfect weather information costs money. And so who pays for that? So there's also a cost element, which is beyond, of course, a digital skill, but it's an access need. There's also, of course, emerging tech, and it's an important digital skill that farmers need to have. But you'll agree with me that not all that is filtering to the smallest holder farmer or farmers in hard-to-reach locations, because maybe it requires internet access, which is not accessible in that locality, or mobile technology, or it requires, this emerging tech could be things like IoTs, drones and the likes. It requires electricity to power it, or solar, and that energy access is not available in those hard-to-reach locations. The third one, which I feel is an urgent digital skill, and I'd be keen to hear what others think about it, is just the data for decision making at policy level. If you look back to, how many countries in the continent, for example, have conducted an agriculture census, they're few and they're far apart. There's data, of course, that is collected at the ministry level, which would call administrative data. Often that is not collected, in a timely way, or harnessing digital technology to generate that data. So there's also a gap there in terms of how do we use technology and the digital technology that we have to produce more timely and available data and accessible data, so that policymakers can make the right decisions at the right time. Moving to the question on who is most at risk of being left behind, I know the panelists will also fit into this. Of course, farmers, smallholder farmers, were often hard to reach, hard to finance, because banks see them as risky, high risk individuals. So those ones, definitely there's a high risk of being left behind. Women, in agriculture, they don't own the land most of the time, but they spend a lot of time on the land. So it means that the returns not always trickles down to them. Again, the youth, and I know we have one speaker who will touch on this more. Again, limited land ownership, and therefore even the benefits of digitization. They might be digital savvy, but if they don't own the land or have interest in agriculture, then their skills don't get used enough or exploited sufficiently for the benefit of the sector. And of course, as I mentioned, those hard to reach, hard to access, limited connectivity, limited electricity, internet, mobile technology. I could also say, and as I wind up, just linking back to agriculture data, is government also risks being left behind if they don't modernize their data collection technology. Because once they don't have access to real-time agriculture data, then it means they're not able to make the right decisions at the right time to save lives, but also strengthen the sector. Thanks, and back to you, moderator Gladys. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. And I think those are great insights, talking about, increasing literacy scaling, among different segments of groups. And thank you for walking us through that. And just to pick this up, definitely, we are speaking to leaders across different countries, in different segments of the society or of the economy. And I'm going to direct this question to Kibrom, and we just want to explore, for this skilling to happen, what models are needed or currently exist, and even as you share this, be practical as possible on what you've seen, what models exist that connect education and training system and are addressing the digital needs that most businesses in agriculture need, or even if you're looking at cooperatives as a segment. And mostly, just to think about what models actually work, or those that you've seen work, or those that have no work, those that are not there in Africa, but you think if this model was replicated in Africa to connect education and training system, they'd actually unlock some of this skilling gaps that Karen has.
Thank you, Gladys. I think I think this is an important question when we think of scaling digital innovations at scale, right? And I'm happy to build on the question and Karen's response. I think when we think of educational and training interventions to address some of the constraints that Karen was mentioning, I think it's very important to understand where are they coming from. Some of them are related to supply side constraints, including access to digital infrastructure, like Karen mentioned. Some of them are related to demand side constraints related to digital literacy or trust issues and related constraints that different groups face. So when we think of educational and training interventions to support diffusion of digital innovations, I think it's important to consider a couple of considerations, particularly if we're aiming to scale at large. The first consideration we should think about is, are they scalable? Are the educational trainings we are promoting scalable to a large group of population? This is very important because we have a lot of instruments and a lot of interventions, but we can't scale them at large, right? And I'll give you an example. For example, we started with training, for example, members of farmer cooperatives in Egypt. And the model that worked very well was what we call training of trainers, where we can't reach all farmers, but we recruited what we call community members who can be trained by digital innovators, and then they would have to train their neighbors and their farmers, right? This is very important because we can't reach all farmers. So that is the first consideration that I definitely would consider. And I think the way to think about that is the example I mentioned, what we call training of trainers, where we train community members, but they would have to train more people themselves. So that's the first thing. The training of training we did in Egypt shows quite promising results. The second consideration we need to think about is, are these interventions likely to address multiple constraints, right? Because users face different multiple constraints, some arising from access to infrastructure and some related to the demand side. And I think it's important, like for example, I'll tell you an example. In Egypt, we started training, like I said, training farmers to use digital tools, but we figured out a large portion or a significant portion of the farmers do not have smartphones. So the training was not effective for those people. So we had to come up with an additional service. We call it a shared access, where we give some access to digital tools to the farmer cooperatives, and they somehow shared them across their peers. So this is very important to address the supply side constraints because not everyone have access to smartphones. Even if they have access to smartphones, they don't have access to some of, for example, if you think of use, we found out that they have access to smartphone, but they don't have the land to plan, right? They don't have the land to use the digital tools for, right? So it's very important to think about this. And third one is they need to be integrated into local systems, either it's education system or whether it's a farmer cooperative system, because otherwise they cannot be sustainable, right? So we need to integrate these trainings into local infrastructure and local systems. And we found farmer cooperatives to be useful for this purpose, where we work with them. And it also proved to be effective in terms of addressing trust issues, where farmers who are used to working with physical intermediaries, traders, they struggle to trust the virtual world, and using community leaders, community members, farmer cooperative leaders were very useful. Second, I think lastly, I'll stop here. It is also important to think about whether the interventions are effective to address what we call the marginalized users. And this could be women, this could be people in hard to reach areas. And it's also very important to plan interventions that can be accessible even to those without any digital literacy, right? So let's consider these things in when we think of educational interventions. And I think the case of Egypt, where we integrated this training of trainers into farmer cooperatives was successful. And we have some work that we are willing to share in the form of journal papers. Thanks. Let me stop here, and I'm happy to come in later if there is opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kiram. I think those are very practical, great case studies you've shared with us on models that actually work to ensure that we are able to develop training and educational systems that address the digital needs of farmers, including cooperatives as well as agribusiness. Great lessons there. And just to pick this up, you've talked about thinking about scaling. You've talked about innovations such as shared services. And I want to move to Mr. Magero, and here we're talking about your role in fostering youth leadership in promoting digital inclusion. And we've seen, what also has been mentioned by Kibram around the whole issue about an ecosystem, about practical exposure, innovative ways of enabling access to this information. And so my question to you is, what role do you think mentorship or even practical exposure plays a key role in enabling people actually transition from training to actual employment? Because here we are talking about building a workforce. So how do we actually ensure that we are equipping the young people with skills enough, even training them and then giving them the capacity to transition? Yeah, over to you. What are some of the practical ways we can go about?
Thank you, Gladys. I think agriculture generally is a unique sector when you talk about workforce development, especially for young people. And at CABI, we have recognized that and appreciated that. The fact that we have factors of production, including land, does not necessarily give young people a starting age if they don't have access to this. So for that reason, then we have looked at integrating and building up from Dr. Kibron's, integrating young people's engagement in the sector into existing ecosystems, identifying opportunities within those ecosystems that otherwise could be looked at as gaps or missing challenges for the farmers, and getting young people to be skilled into providing solutions, could be in form of agricultural service provision, etc. But when we go back into mentorship, apprenticeship, and this kind of elements of certification, etc., then basically just appreciating the uniqueness of the sector, then it's not very easy for a young person to just get trained and transition directly into employment or setting up their own enterprise in the sector unless they're integrated in the system, unless they are mentored, and they are also given different elements. Just understanding that we are dealing with the food system sector, then they need that level of certification and apprenticeship. And in the context of Kabi, in the last couple of years, Kabi has established what I would call peer mentorship for agribusiness development. And this has worked very well, like in the Kenyan and Ugandan context, where we have trained young people anchored on existing farmer cooperatives, but also existing agribusinesses that are in the form of off-takers, etc., and gotten young people to be trained as agricultural service providers, to be trained to establish businesses at the different nodes along the value chains of these crops and produce. And they are not just, of course, serving farmers in form of micro enterprises, but we've gone further to leverage the trainer of trainers to get these young people who are now doing great in these trades to actually kind of disseminate on this knowledge and disseminate it within the community so that they're not entirely dependent on, I would call it funded interventions in the long run. And we've seen this growing where we now have, on average, peer mentors working and training an additional about, each of them running with about 6 other young people, both men and women. And this has seen some successful outcomes. One of the unique elements was that, we are seeing the mentees who are being mentored by this train of trainers doing even much better than the original group. And this is just because they are already in the ecosystem. They are attached to these elements. They have the, the skin in the game, but then they just needed that kind of social support. And then eventually they are given linked to other opportunities to scale this up. And of course, we are also leveraging Kabi's digital learning and decision-making tools, which includes the Kabi Academy. So Kabi has a Kabi Academy, which is really an online learning platform with most of the existing courses. They are both technical and agribusiness courses, really free and open access to some of our young people. We've seen this even being used by institutions of learning in agricultural tutors to just facilitate that continued self-paced learning beyond what is in existence. I think I would also talk a little bit about the certifications that has happened, just appreciating that we are working in the food system sector. Then we have gone further to work with the players in the sector, especially government, to not only get our young people trained and running micro enterprises, but unpack that a little more to expose our young people to both regional, national, and global opportunities by getting them certified. For instance, in Uganda, we have the local seed business model where we are training currently in a pilot phase about 200 young people on quality declared seed, and we are getting them certified by, of course, the relevant ministries in Uganda. If we look at Kenya, we are working in different elements of seed and seedling production, and you're getting the likes of KEPHIS, which is Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate, certifying these young people. Same with Zambia, where we are now looking at, when we talk about plant health, we are really looking at safe quality seed. So we are working with about 100 people, including young people, to produce clean cassava planting materials. We are getting them registered and certified, and then really leveraging on mentorship and peer learning and TOTs to then scale this up in numbers so that all we continue providing, is just technical backstopping and kind of support that is happening, but then linking them to the digital tools, both for learning and decision making, to enable them continue supporting themselves in the communities. I think the last example would be Zambia, for instance, where in the last, I think half a year, actually, less than a year, we are working with about 100 right now. These are pilot phase programs, young people that have set up youth-led farmer cooperatives. And we are now going further to contextualize what they are doing and enable them then be able to strengthen their own cooperatives and be able to, establish self-learning, knowledge sharing mechanisms amongst themselves. And they are coming up as cooperative models that even other local farmer communities are actually learning from these young people. So yeah, I can confidently say that there's great opportunities when we can leverage peer learning amongst young people.
Yeah, great insight, Magero. And there's actually a comment here from somebody called Faustina who is saying, actually one of the KABI's training of trainers in gender in rural advisory services and KABI digital tools, very helpful tools in disease diagnostic and management. So yeah, definitely great interventions you're doing, and good to learn from you of some of the practical ways in which KABI is promoting this. And also, since you're speaking to leaders here, and most of the leaders here want to really understand how we can reach youth as well, reach the last mile. And I know that this has been talked about by all the panelists, but just to top it up, Ronald, just let us know what are some of the effective or even practical ways in which we've actually promoted this skilling, but also building this workforce by reaching most effective strategies to actually reach youth in rural as well as conflict affected areas with the relevant training. Yeah, maybe you can let us know, building on what everyone else has said and practically based on what you're currently working on.
Okay, thank you, Gladys. One way to reach the youth in conflicted areas that we have piloted before is leveraging digital and offline mobile-based learning platforms. Nowadays, you can see youths have access to mobile phones even in remote areas, and we can use simple search tools as SMS, WhatsApp, and also offline mobile-based platforms. In an area of work, we have developed one platform called Mbegu Choice, which is a variety recommendation tool for farmers. And it's offline and also online. So if you don't have any internet bundles, you can still access that information. And this has proven to be very helpful, especially in farmers in the rural areas. Secondly, I think what we have done in our area of work is to partner with local institutions, especially churches and mosques, schools and CBOs. We realize nowadays that even in conflicted areas, these institutions still remain, and it's where youths and women take refuge. And we have used this before in group trainings in terms of field days and demos, in terms of passing information to youths, farmers, and also women. So that's the second way we have done that. The third and very critical one is the use of radios and local language to pass this information to youth and women. We can realize that 90% of the households in different African settings have radios. So this is the best way to pass information, especially in the evening when they listen to radios. So we have done this in promoting those digital tools and also promoting this agricultural information in terms of passing information to farmers. And it has worked very well. Across what we have done, we have reached around 300,000 farmers in terms of promoting these tools and access to information.
Yeah.
Continue, Gladys.
Okay, I don't know if you have anything else to add regarding
in terms
that,
of
other practical examples. Yeah.
We have also combined training with livelihood incentives or inputs. In terms of training, we offer kits such as vouchers, linkage to microfinance, and completion of in terms of after they completed their training, we offer these starter kits so that they can be engaged in terms of just trying out and starting to make their livelihood instead of just training them and leaving them just to go with the training. We give them a starter kit where they can begin from. So those are some ways we have done that. Yeah, so and it has proven to be very successful because it gives incentives to youths in terms of agriculture. People say agriculture is not very, it does not have incentive for the youths, but I think if you couple things as such a technology, incentives, it makes it more for the youth, it makes it more affordable and also makes them engaged in agriculture. So thank you.
Yeah, and just also following on that question regarding the incentives, because it's one of the questions that has been asked by Gikundi, and I'm sure we are building this. Yesterday we had a discussion about the future of work, and one of the we're exploring some of the opportunities of engaging youth in digital agriculture, and one of the questions that is coming up is what are the incentives that are there so that we can engage youth, to support in data collection if they're not in mainstream employment. I don't know if we can get response from that, from Karen, looking at the fact that collecting data, or rather informing digital literacy, or even in data to inform agriculture development and innovation, there's need for collection of data. But how can we actively engage these young people, and how do we incentivize them, especially if they're not in mainstream employment? I don't know if you have any practical examples.
Yeah, thanks, Gladys. I think data is a public good. So often people who contribute to data processes do it because the benefit of good data outweighs the costs of collecting it. But I think what I've seen as incentives for young people to participate in data processes has mostly gone around using examples like citizen science, where communities, young people contribute to data production, but there's a benefit. So there's a benefit in terms of employment, as Ronald was mentioning, or a benefit in terms of access to inputs, but also the benefit of them being part of the solution. So once they, contribute to data collection, there's also a role for them to put to action the findings from the data. So they don't just see themselves as, people just behind the questionnaire asking questions and ticking boxes, but actually there's a meaningful process of engaging them so that they can also recommend what the action needs to be. And I think once we see young people and also farmers as not just respondents to our questions, but also agents who can take action without needing government to intervene all the time, then you start seeing that data is a really powerful mechanism to bring change in the communities. One example that comes to mind was actually in the veterinary infectious disease example that we found in Kenya, where there was a disease outbreak. Farmers knew what was causing the disease outbreak, and it was going to take too long for government to intervene by providing access to the vaccines for the animals. But what the communities did, they mobilized themselves and they paid for those vaccines without waiting for government. And you see, that's the power when people really see the value of the data they're contributing to, then they'll take action even without government intervening. So I think there's, of course, the incentives of employment and agriculture inputs, but I think the bigger incentive is not just seeing people as respondents to questionnaires or just providing input to data production, but also being engaging them through the whole value chain, data value chain, so that they can also see how their knowledge and experience in decisions is useful and that they can take action.
Yeah, thank you so much for those insights and practical examples. There's a comment here from Faustina who is saying, Kibrom, definitely there's need to integrate digital training, including farmer cooperatives as a strategy for sustainability. But there's also another question here from Jean-Marc, and as you respond to this, Kibrom, some of the leaders that are listening to us today, they represent government ministries, and a question here is, how can African governments and education stakeholders integrate real-time industry needs into curricula and ensure that digital agriculture training is relevant, practical, and future ready?
Thank you, Gladys. I think that this is a very good question. We have done a recent review of the landscape of digital innovations in Africa, and one of the things we identified is the pace through which digital innovations and the ecosystem, the global one, is going is much faster than the pace African countries and African governments are adjusting to the needs of the system. For example, there are a lot of regulation challenges where many governments in Africa struggle to have a proper regulating mechanism that allows them to somehow guide the digital revolution. And I think this is very important in the sense that it's important to update and quickly catch up with the evolving revolution in digital tools and technologies. So that is one thing that we found. And then they either need to integrate our education trainings and particularly digital agriculture trainings into current systems. This is very important, and I think in many countries there are extension services that need or that I'm seeing benefiting a lot from digital services, digital agricultural services. There is quite a number of lessons on how to combine conventional delivery of digital agricultural services with digital tools, where in some countries we are seeing even the development agents and technical people are using digital tools to support their service. So there is a definite need for integrating that within the system. That is what I can say for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we have 3 minutes to the top of the hour, and I want to move to Mr. Magero. And there's a question here asking about your courses, so you can expound on that. But even as I want us to do like a 1-minute wrap up responding to this question, because we are addressing leaders and we want them to leave this forum with action plans. And one of the action would be asking what leadership actions are needed from these leaders to actually build a truly future ready agriculture workforce. And these leaders represent people from government, industry, as well as private sector. What do they need to put in place for them to build a future ready agriculture workforce? So let's start with Mr. Magero, then we go to Ronald, and then Karen, and then we finish with Kibrom.
Thank you very much. And yes, most of Kabi Academy courses are free to access or open to access, especially for African regions. So yes, I would encourage us to share with our different players in the sector at the community level and at different levels. But if we have any challenges, you can always reach out to Kabi and we can address that. That being said, on actions going forward, I think I would summarize this by talking about being very practical in terms of building ecosystem partnerships, both at the different policy, government levels, but please do not leave out the real farmer on the ground. And so working closely with farmer associations who have the practical context of what they need and what they are facing can be a great opportunity for us to create very practical solutions. And then eventually also empowering our young people at that level means that we can have decades of long-term, solutions being embedded in the communities. And we've seen that work continuously, successfully. And lastly, I would just say it is also practical to really appreciate that when we embed young people and solution providers within the existing farmer ecosystems, then we win way faster than if we expect to create change at the highest level. So I'll just say that for now, Gladys, it's been a great pleasure being with you all here.
Thank you. Let's move to Ronald, then Karen, then Kibrom.
I think I'll make it short and I'll address action to government. I think they must lead by prioritizing agriculture and national skill development plans, investing in rural digital infrastructure and supporting youth through incentives, land access and inclusive policies. I think this will be a great achievement if they do this for the youth.
Just building on what Deogratius and Ronald have mentioned. I think the two things that stand for me, and I'll just reflect on what I read this week, that agriculture is not bankable, it's not financed. When you compare, how banks are thriving in a country like Kenya, it's not because of financing agriculture. So there's actually an opportunity to increase access to financing for agriculture. And that is, creating that enabling environment for government. I think there's also something that your Grace has mentioned about that multi-stakeholder collaboration. And I think government can definitely lead from the front by creating spaces where exchange of knowledge, skills, and the actual data when it comes to agriculture is possible. I know for sure that really good and very granular data sector, because of course it is also used for business and for profit. But there are ways that government and the private sector can exchange data in a way that is, beneficial to all. It's done safely. It's done in a collaborative way, and that, government does not need to have a lot of money to carry out an agriculture census every 10 years, while this data sits on a daily basis within the private sector. So there's cross discussions and cross exchange of knowledge and experience and the data to enable government to make.
Thank you so much, Abi.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I think the first message that I would imagine is important is it's always important to have an updated assessment of the landscape of digital ecosystem in the country. And I think having that can always help to inform what interventions are needed to scale up digital innovations. I'm saying this partly because we have seen a lot of digital tools and apps that are at the pilot stage, but not all of them scale up. Not all of them reach the farmer. So this is very important. And part of the limitation and constraint is the digital ecosystem itself, including the infrastructure, the regulations we have in the country are not sufficiently supporting that. And that's what I would say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much, panelists. For making it and for giving us such wisdom on how to build a digital workforce. And this is to thank the delegates also for being with us and putting in your questions. So we are now going for our lunch break. And just to let you know, Ethiopia is still leading, followed by Ghana, followed by Kenya and Malawi. So in the next sessions after the lunch break, we'll have 3 other sessions. So feel free to continue contributing and for your country to be represented. But from here, from the panelists, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you after lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.